Greetings, everyone. This is Cheri Arellano with the Divine Lunch Hour and Divine Light Codes. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you guys tuning in to our show today. I have a really special guest today, which I'm excited to share with you. But before I bring him on, I just wanted to share that you can watch this show now on YouTube and not TikTok, Rumble, as well as Facebook. So if you're joining us from any of those platforms today, please give us a little hello in the chat room so we know where you're watching from. And also, if you can mention what city you're watching from. I love to know where everyone is watching from. And also, you can find us now on TikTok at Divine Light Codes. So just wanted to share a couple of those updates before we bring on our guest. And we have a really special guest today. His name is Isaac Mars, and he calls himself a theoretical physicist. He's also the author of a book called Unity Theory. And really quickly, I'm going to read to you a little bit about from his bio. As the first theoretical physicist in human history to publicly propose a simple theory of everything that demystifies the concepts of time, dark matter, dark energy, and consciousness, Isaac Mars is shattering obsolete paradigms with his new book, Unity Theory. And without further ado, I'm going to bring on our guest, Isaac. Hi, Isaac. Welcome to the show.
Greetings, Cheri. Thank you for having me here. Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing wonderful out there and are excited to learn some interesting things today.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. This is going to be, definitely in the realm of the topics that we usually discuss on the Divine Lunch Hour, but also new and different and exciting. So I'm really excited to have you on. And I was wondering if we could just start with you simply sharing with the audience a little bit about yourself and where you're from and how you got into physics.
Absolutely. So we only have an hour and there's a lot of material to get through. So I'm going to just kind of channel and blast this information. So I'm originally from the Metro Detroit area of Michigan, and I grew up a typical average person in a suburban area with normal public school. My life was basically as average could be. I've just noticed that throughout my life, I've always had this very gifted logical mind in the sense that I could see patterns. I could see the way that things were being done were not being done to the highest level of optimization. So I had this level of awareness throughout my entire life that something was off. And even at like 6 years old, 7 years old, I was noticing that as linear time went on, things got more and more difficult. Things got more and more restricted or more strict in a sense. And, in terms of laws, in terms of rules. And I realized, this is not sustainable. This is going to crumble at some point. And ever since I was young, I told everybody that I've ever known that I'm here to change the world. And I didn't know what that was going to look like. I didn't know how I was going to do it. But all I've ever wanted to do was to be a simple, humble hero of the people, somebody that is there to help others when nobody else will show up. And in that energy, I realized that I did not belong in the world as we know it. I felt rejected. I felt like this society was not something that would accept me. And I knew that I needed to break out of my fear to manifest my dreams. And after I met a soulmate of mine that was very awakening into certain aspects of spirituality, auras, vision, being able to see beyond this realm, stuff like that. And I had this really intense dark night of the soul after she and I separated. And in that dark night of the soul, I actually leaned on my shadow, my darkness, to push forward and to benefit me. And the way that I did that is I had spent almost 3 to maybe even up to 5 years formulating the science fiction story that I was going to type out to become an author. And that was my plan. I was going to write out this epic story, picking all the best plot points from all the stories in our collective consciousness, from all the different movies and TV shows I'd watched over my years. And this new epic, it was going to touch on all the issues in this world. And I finally used that shadow because I felt so much anger towards the soulmate I had these experiences with, because she was unwilling to look at her shadow, and I was. And so I was here trying to manifest this harmony between us, and she just kept, these projections coming at me, and I was angry at that, and I knew that the only way that I could show her what I really was about and who I really was to achieve my dreams. And so I took that shadow and that resentment towards this world, this society, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go all in, no matter what it takes, no matter how stressful it is, no matter how fearful it may be. Boom, I'm in it. Started typing. I finished chapter 1. I felt really good, but by chapter 2, I knew I needed an explanation of time before I could move any further, because I needed that explanation to make sense for my readers to be really invested in the story when there's time travel and elements like that going on in the plot.
Mm-hmm.
And I started researching Albert Einstein's theory of relativity very closely. I started watching videos on videos about him. I started watching Nikola Tesla videos. And this was all during a time in which Alan Watts was like my primary podcast that I'd listen to all the time. I just listened to his old recorded lectures from the 60s.
Were you like in your teens or early 20s, or can you give
This
us
was 2021. So this was
just a couple years ago. Okay.
Yep, this was
Mm-hmm.
January of 2021. And there was this one part of Alan Watts' lectures that's one of my favorite pieces he's ever said, and it's about this ultimate dreamer. And essentially, what was happening is I was integrating this theory of relativity, and then Nikola Tesla's one quote, that if you want to learn the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration.
Mm-hmm.
Between the theory of relativity, that quote, and Alan Watts and his Ultimate Dreamer lecture, which is, I'll just say it right now, it's not that long. It's, if you were an all-powerful being, if you were a god, a goddess, if you were the ultimate creator being, you
Mm-hmm.
would experience any dream that you could imagine. So if this was the case, as you began on this adventure of dreams, you would fulfill all your wishes. You'd have every pleasure you could seek.
Mm-hmm.
Then after several nights, you'd say, well, that was pretty great. But now let's have a surprise. Let's have a dream which isn't under my control. Well, something's going to happen to me, but I don't know what it's going to be. Then you would get more and more adventurous, and you'd make further and further out gambles as to what you would dream. And then finally, you would dream where you are in this exact moment. And when I heard that, I heard it so many times before, but it never fully clicked. And I heard it for about the 100th time, right when I was integrating the theory of relativity and everything being energy.
Mm-hmm.
What's this thing? At that time, I was like, what is this matter stuff? Who came up with matter? It doesn't exist. It's literally a fallacy. It's an illusion. It's a red herring. And so I figured out that everything was energy. I realized that everything in that moment exists ultimately within my mind, which is the first law of Hermeticism, which is the law of mentalism. The universe is a mental construct. And I realized all of this exists in my mind, even my own physical body. It doesn't really exist except for in the perceptions of my mind. And that means if I'm like that, then Cheri's like that, then dogs are like that, cats, ants, birds, everything, every single atom is like
Mm-hmm.
that. And that is what we call the holodynamic universe. Every part contains the whole. As Rumi said, we are not a drop in the ocean, we are the ocean in a drop. And when we integrate what this reveals to us, it just blasts everything open. So before I go into all what it blasts open, I'll just explain what happened next for me. So I get this intense download, and in hindsight, I discovered that there was actually a astrological portal open from the Pleiades during December 21st of 2020. So
Mm-hmm.
this portal opened up, and then I started getting all this energy, and that's when I started to finally type the book. And about a week or two into January, that's when all this happen like that. And I'm like, what is going on? And I'm like, I'm freaking out, Cheri, because in this moment, I'm like, they kill people for this. I literally just discovered how to fundamentally change the world and to scientifically qualify it. Nobody else in human history has done that. And if they
Mm.
did, they would have been disappeared, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I went through this big fear purge experience, and the short version of what happened is I explained this to my only, friends at the time, which was my biological family, my sister and my mother, and they looked at me and they literally thought I was crazy. And they thought that I needed help, that I needed to go to a mental institution because I was explaining that, these things out here that are taught to be for us and for our benefit are actually the very things that are keeping us in hell, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
And that was totally destroying their entire illusion. So for them, the only thing they could do is go into that fear, into that mind, and go into the Agent Smith programming of the Matrix. And I followed my heart
Mhm.
because I'm Isaac Andrew Mars. I decided to go to the I Am Temple in Chicago, Illinois, just following my intuition because they were a group of spiritual scientists. And I was going to go to propose to them my theory. And I ended up arriving in Chicago at the facility about 30 minutes late, or 30 minutes early before they closed, but they closed early. So I just decided I'm going to go look for some pizza. Pizza is my favorite food in this human life, and Chicago's got good pizza. And I'm driving down a one-way street, and suddenly there's a cop car coming towards me the opposite way on the one-way street, the wrong way with its lights on. I'm like, whoa, there must be something big going on. Then suddenly I'm surrounded 360 degrees from every angle. These police vehicles, including SWAT, come out, hold me at gunpoint, start yelling about vectors of fire and their safety's off,
What?
and they're yelling at me saying, if you don't get out of the vehicle now, we are going to open fire. And immediately I just throw up my hands. I go, you're going to be killing an innocent man. I was in the Army for almost 7 years. We would not even we won't treat insurgents overseas in this manner. You are not going to get away treating me this way in my own country. And they kept arguing with me. They kept trying to yell at me. Every single officer, except for the one standing right at my door who just held his AR-15 like this, they were all aiming center mass, safety's off the whole time that they're talking to me. And
Wow.
I explained to him, I am not going to comply until you put your weapons away. I'm recording stuff on Facebook, but I'm like shaky because I don't actually have the app on my phone. So I have to like record it and then post it without them noticing. And so I'm doing all this stuff. If you actually go on my Facebook, like scroll back to that time of my life, you can find one of the clips that's still on there,
Hmm.
of me confronting the officer. And the officer ends up yelling at me through my window. He says, you better listen to me. And I yelled back at him with all of my spirit, my strength, my tenacity, my courage. And I said, no, you listen to me. And in
Mhm.
that moment, every single officer around me simultaneously lowered their weapons and were knocked back by an unseen, invisible force. And I looked
Wow.
around, did I do that? And I looked at the officer that I yelled at, and he looked at me like, who the heck are you? And in that moment, everything shifted. I literally used what we would call the I am presence, or the I am authority of the universe, of our
Mhm.
free will, of our hearts, to quantumly shift myself into an infinite timeline in which I was able to have the authority in the situation. And they sent over a police sergeant. He talked to me and asked what I needed for us to move forward, and he listened to me ultimately. After that, I ended up in the precinct. They booked me, but then I had to get interviewed by the FBI, and all the FBI wanted to know about was this. They wanted to know what I knew, and this was before this was a
So
book.
so why did they pull you over? Like, what was their reason? I mean, you were just eating pizza in Chicago. That's not a crime.
Their reasoning was it was a wellness check because my family had figured out what city I
Oh,
went to and called the police,
okay.
because they were nervous because I said miracles are real and I'm going to prove it to the world. And they were so in fear that they took that and completely twisted it in their own mind. and thought that I was going to go do some crazy thing. And that wasn't the case at all. But even if it was a wellness check, how are you going to respond to a wellness check with SWAT and guns,
Right.
threatening lethal action? It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Um, so that experience happened. I ended up having to prove my mental stability to our mental institutions, and soon enough I got out. But when I was in those places, I realized they treat star seeds, light workers. Those are the
Mhm.
people that are in these psych
Right.
wards and
Yeah.
institutions. They're just like you and me, Cheri. They're just
Mhm.
lost in the sauce in regard to their emotional energy and their fear. And they have manifested, whether they know it or not, this situation in which they're in the spiritual dumpster of this planet. And I needed to experience that to know how to move forward for the rest of the collective and to show them the truth, to speak on it, and let them know I experienced this firsthand. After that, I ended up driving 1,000 miles to Austin, Texas to attempt to give Elon Musk this new science, because everything he's doing makes zero sense with the true science. But with the materialist reductionist science that he's being told, that's molding his opinion, his ideas.
Mhm.
Um, he has this group of people around him that are all telling him false things. They're telling him lies. And I truly believe that he's a good person and he's lost in the sauce and he doesn't realize what's going on, that he's being lied to. And when he learns the truth about reality, one, he's not going to be working with jets, or not jets, rockets. He's not going to be using, I mean, that's the most ghetto transport system in the entire universe, when we already
Sure.
have identified flying objects that can use anti-gravitic repulsion and
Mhm.
bilocation and teleportation. I mean, that's 100% the only way that we're going to become an interstellar species, is going that direction, not rockets.
Right. I've
So
always wondered why he's doing that. Like, is it just a show? Is he just continuing the show? This, to have people believe that we don't have anti-gravitic, ships, and we don't have the technology. It's almost like he's perpetuating the lie.
right, and where he's at, whether or not he knows what he's doing, that is ultimately what he's accomplishing, is perpetuating the lie.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, when I got to that front gate, this is what happened. I explained to them what I was doing there. I was bringing this new physics to Mr. Musk that would change everything for his company. They're like, okay, that's great. Do you have an appointment? No, I don't have an appointment. I just told you, this is my conversation with the security guard. I just told you that I tried every email and every phone number. So no, I don't have an appointment. I just need to talk to somebody in the company. It doesn't have to be Mr. Musk. Everything's fine so far. And then the security guard says, okay, well, what's your name? And I say, my name's Isaac Mars. And then the security guard responds by going, you have to leave right now. And I'm like,
What?
what? I'm like, I worked security for a year on the civilian side. We don't say that to anybody. Like, you get my phone number, it's just all backwards. So I call him out. I'm like, what is that about? That's suspicious. I literally drove 1,000 miles here and you're telling me I have to leave immediately as I get to the gate. We'd never treat people like this at the job that I worked in security. And so they immediately call the police, and I'm trying to get, I assume that negative attention is better than no attention at this point, because clearly somebody's trying to keep me from talking to this man.
Mhm.
And so I stick around and I try and reach out to somebody out the window that's coming off the evening shift. The police arrive within literally like 5 minutes, very quickly. And they get my window down, they get me restrained, and then they take me into jail. And then while I'm in jail for 10 days, I had a tuberculosis test, which I want to kind of go a little faster so we can get into the rest of the stuff. So
Mhm.
I had this tuberculosis test. Long story short, they did not even come back to check on it within their required time, which is not the same time that I was trained on in the Army as a medic. In the Army, I was trained to check this tuberculosis test within 15 to 30 minutes. They said that they check it within 2 to 3 days, which makes no sense for an extremely contagious disease. And then the nurse never came back, and then I had really intense symptoms of a AAA, an abdominal aortic aneurysm, which is essentially a heart attack or a stroke, which is a brain attack, but it's in the abdomen. And we can bleed out our entire blood volume into our abdomen. And what I was experiencing was increased heart rate, increased contractility, so my heart was pounding, and vasodilation, which is our blood vessels opening up, and
Mhm.
us feeling lightheaded and kind of weak. And then the final symptom was a pulsating mass in my abdomen. And that pulsating mass is the hallmark sign of a AAA. And as this was
Wow.
happening, I just kept praying and crying my eyes out, saying, I have faith unto death, faith unto death. Even if I die, I'm going to ascend into my angelic body and I'm going to get out of this facility and hold these people accountable. I kept visualizing that over and over again, saying faith unto death. Then a little bit after that, I had this wave of healing energy come over me because I had decided that the poisonous food in there, I couldn't eat anymore. So I was just fasting with water. And after that healing wave, I'm like, oh no, this is good. I feel better. I feel like my heart's calming down. And then I ended up getting interrogated by an alleged physician who, again, was only asking about this. And right around the ninth day, I opened up the Bible to a random page and I said, I revealed the truth to me. And I put my finger down. And I trust that holodynamically, the universe is going to give me the response. And it does. And it's Revelation 2, verse 10. Behold, do not be afraid, for the devil is about to throw you into prison. And for 10 days, you will have trial and tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and you will
Wow.
have life. And exactly on the 10th day, they opened up the cell door and said, Isaac, you're free to leave. All charges were dropped. And that's when I decided, you know what? I'm marching into the lion's den. I don't need to do this anymore. I don't need to keep trying to immediately change the world out of fear. I'm going to follow my heart. And everything just started lining up for me. Door after door opened up. I started meeting soul family. I started to literally get downloads and visions from psychedelic experiences, realizing our limitless
Mhm.
potential, seeing into the future, getting visions of people I've never even met before in this life that I ended up meeting 8 months later once I ended up in Sedona, Arizona. None of these things are coincidences. For us
Mhm.
to have a coherent story in our reality with all these miraculous things that do happen that are somewhat explainable, but still it's like, what are the chances of that? The only way that that can happen is if there is an intelligent system running this whole show. And
Mhm.
that's the whole title of Unity Theory. Unity Theory is actually the book title. The full theory title is the Universal Natural Intelligence Theory of Energetics, which all the big letters spell unite. And
Cool.
yeah, so that's basically my story in a nutshell. There's been some other crazy things that have happened. I've had ET contact with an entire Guardian fleet on top of Mount Shasta with my friend Nathan Lindsay of Vibes N frequencies on YouTube. And
Mhm.
I mean, I just
How close were the ships? Because I've also had a fleet experience on top of Mount Shasta.
interesting. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say the ships were probably if no more than a kilometer in the sky according to my human eyes. And
Yeah. So
but
they
the thing
looked
is,
somewhat smallish.
yeah,
Yeah.
but they kind of looked like stars. But the thing was,
Right.
it got to the point where they were all moving, and Nathan was seeing the same thing that I was seeing. They were all
Mhm.
moving, and you couldn't tell what was stars and what were ships. That was literally that
Right.
many ships moving around and like doing interesting maneuvers, so you can tell that they're all moving around. And
Right.
then they ended
I
up
had the
doing this.
same experience. There was a mothership, and then we saw it go up. We watched this over 90 minutes, and then suddenly, like, all these other little ships started following that mothership, and they were all, like,
Whoa.
vibrating, cyan, magenta, white, cyan, magenta, white. That was the colors they were spinning, and they all, like, eventually left the atmosphere.
That is so cool, Cheri. You're the
I
first
have
person.
I
You're the
have a
first
video of
person.
it on my YouTube channel.
Wow. So
Yeah.
yeah, you're experiencing there must be like some sort of above Earth station there, mothership station that navigates all those ships and dictates what they need to do or something, because in my experience, the ships that we were interacting with once we started to notice all these geometric patterns they were aligning in, equilateral triangles, stuff like that, then
Mhm.
suddenly they started to gather together, and like you just said, a mothership started to phase in slightly. It wasn't the full mothership, but it was like a section of the ship, and they were doing this like conga line and making their ships rainbow color, like doing like a parade for us.
Wow.
And when I would say things like, or Nathan would ask me a question, he'd say, "Who do you think that is?" And I'd say, "I think it's the Galactic Federation and the Alliance." And then all the stars, all the ships would go psh and brighten up in response.
Wow. Yeah.
And then he'd ask me like, "What star nations do you think are up there?" And I'd say, "I think our whole family is up there." And then they'd brighten up again and then dim back down as if to say yes. And then when that mothership phased in, that part, these four red, almost like X-wing looking ships, they were much smaller than the orb ships, and
Mhm.
they were like singular fighter ships, is what they felt like. And four then came out, and Nathan asked me, "What do you think they're doing?" And I'm getting chills thinking about this. And I say, "I think they're upgrading us." And the second that I say that, and I finish that sentence, boom, they shoot across the sky in all four directions faster than the speed of light, creating traces of light where they moved. And we
Wow.
both were like, "Whoa, like, did you feel that energy that came off of that?" And it was really powerful. So
That's so
that that
cool.
that was profound. Ever since then, I've been explaining to people how to make contact any night they
Mhm.
want, just connecting with one of these ships that look like a star. And
Right.
I've had people come back left and right. "Isaac, I tried your thing. I connected with a ship intuitively, asked it to move, and it started moving. I just had to believe, and then it started working." And
Mhm.
that's how we're going to make global disclosure happen, is by me sharing my experience, other people trying it, and then it working for them, and then that just echoing out. And if it gets to the point where so many people experience ET contact, and so many of us are so high vibration that the way that reality works, we manifest that globally. So
Right.
without further ado, we got 33 minutes left. I think I should just
You're
go
good.
into the whole
You're a
download.
good time tracker. We should talk about time and time travel or timelines rather as
Yeah.
well, because I feel like so many people are sharing about how they're starting to experience two timelines at once. I don't know
Hmm.
if you've experienced that or you've heard anyone reporting that lately, but people are saying like be careful when you're driving because you could be driving between two timelines and then like a car appears that came out of nowhere and just weird
That
anomalies are happening.
Those things are absolutely possible in the grand scheme of reality. But for me, what resonates more is time differences between living beings. So there's two people in my life lately that we've discovered, and we're still trying to figure it all out, but we've discovered that one of them has somehow fit more linear time into a certain number of years that doesn't make sense. So he's been time dilating and kind of like looping back into his experience. That's the only thing that would make sense. And then on top of that, him and another individual in my life say that they met me in a place that I don't remember meeting them. And I have a completely
Interesting.
different set of memories where I met them in my experience. And we can't reconcile these timelines.
That's
And it
fascinating.
which correlates with what we were told by the Looking Glass project, that all of these infinite timelines are ultimately funneling into one singular timeline.
Mhm.
And that means all of our best versions are essentially bleeding into the one timeline, and our best versions may not come from the same timeline that our friends come from, or our lovers, or our family. And it's very strange to start to witness and experience, but it is another indication that time is merely an illusion.
Can you speak
So,
on the looping a little bit more? Because someone else, another friend of mine, has been speaking on looping as well. So I'd love to hear your friend's experience and what they reported.
sure. So, what I'm explaining is similar to what they describe in the 20 and Back program. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah, so the whole idea of the 20 and Back program is that if this is the timeline of the person's life experiencing that program, they how they loop time is like this. So here's the timeline that we're in this now moment, okay? This
Mhm.
timeline's always existed, and everything that's happened, it's already, etched into the timeline. It's a DVD, it's a movie, it's already done. But then someone in the 20 back program here at age 5, they're taken on a different experience that's not this timeline, and
Right.
they go over here and they start to have all these experiences, and after 20 years pass, then boom, their consciousness is taken, because time is nonlinear and this is possible, back to when they were 5 years old the next day.
Mhm.
And it's like only a day passed, but that loop that was created was real perceived linear time experienced by that spirit, that individual, that consciousness. But then it's so peculiar because it's like from one day to the next in this timeline, they're a completely different person. And that's
Mhm.
that's what I theorize what was happening with my close brother, because I mean, the only way that you can fit more time into less time is by literally adding it. So you'd have to do that loop experience, and that's an addition of extra perceived linear time from his experience. And that's the only thing that makes sense. And that's exactly how I describe time in unity theory, as nonlinear, as infinite timelines. So why
Mhm.
don't we just jump into that so that your audience can understand how it all works?
Sounds good.
So in unity theory, I have this thought experiment called the infinity mirror proof. And I'm specifically calling it the infinity mirror proof now because the takeaway from it is that it's inarguable. It uses what I call symmetrical geometric logic, which means the logic is just as foolproof as 2 plus 2 equals 4. It's essentially a mathematical concept. And what I did is I reflected on time. And as I was reflecting on time, I literally thought, okay, the word reflect, there's something there. There's a key here for me. And so I started to imagine myself as the present moment. And in quantum mechanics and per the theory of relativity, it's very clear in his work, Albert Einstein and all of quantum theory, they explain that all of time happens at once. Time is the stubbornly persistent illusion. This is why we have things like
Mhm.
superpositioning. Superpositioning in quantum mechanics is essentially, well, there's actually an infinite number of ways that this object can exist, yet it's when we look at it that it's existing this specific way. Okay?
Mhm.
And because the long story short of that, and you can look into this on your own for those of you that are watching this, because of that specific data, that evidence, it implies through perfect logic within, Einstein's work and quantum theory, that there has to be, or that all of timeline. Oh my gosh, I cannot talk right now. All of time
Rewind.
happens. So since all of time happens at once, I thought, how can I explain this to my readers when I was writing this initial science fiction novel? And I pictured myself, an observer, as the present moment. This symbolically and metaphorically made sense because the present moment's always in flux. I can always move my body around. I can do whatever I want in the present moment. And then
Mhm.
I thought, okay, well, the present moment is happening now, but the past is also happening now because all of time happens at once. So, how do I explain that? How do I represent that? Well, the word reflect made me think of a mirror. So, I put a mirror in front of myself, and this mirror I was looking into is my past. It's not just one moment of my past, it is literally all of my past. And then I thought, this makes sense symbolically. We see our past by looking into our memories, but we can't reach in and change it necessarily. And then I thought, okay, I'm on a timeline. And all of the moments leading up to this moment now is just a line. It's a straight line from a certain philosophical experience, from a imaginative experience. So the future has to be behind the observer. This also made metaphorical sense because you can't see the future. And then when I realized what would happen if
Mhm.
that observer was standing between those two parallel mirrors, I realized that the present moment was infinitely multiplied both into the past and into the future, which means that they're all already happening. And that signifies that much like how a train cannot reach its destination unless all of the tracks are already laid, a man or woman cannot reach the end of their life unless all the moments already exist. So
Mhm.
this means that we already have a timeline. We already have a future. It's all predetermined. It's all happening. But wait, there's no free will on that one example. So how do we account for that? Because I know that we have free will. And while I was going through this experience, I had to take it a step further to figure it out. Because if I accepted it just with this one timeline, that would freak me out. I couldn't do it. So I started to imagine how we might want to get like a pop from the store or something, and we have the option between Coke or Pepsi, the age old thing. And that right there is an indication that there has to be at least another timeline in which you're choosing the Pepsi instead of the Coke. And then with every other
Mhm.
interaction we make with reality, they're literally infinite potentials, infinite choices. And so the only way to keep that line, which is a symmetrical system, symmetrical, is if you take the past mirror and the future mirror and you infinitely multiply it around that present moment. And that sphere, that mirror sphere, contains every unimaginable timeline that could ever exist. And it is what we call a singularity. And
Mm.
since the entire universe is within our minds, we are the singularity. We are literal infinite potential. And what you can imagine, because of this explanation, there has to be infinite timelines. So if everything's energy, frequency, and vibration, there's
Mhm.
only two options: low vibration and high vibration. Do you want to experience heaven and unconditional love and freedom and safety and security and joy? Or do you want to experience hell and suffering and pain and torment? Because that's what our options are. Because if we are this holodynamic universe experiencing itself, which everything points to be the case, and all of science, everything we've ever known, all of the spiritual teachings for thousands of years, they're all telling us this. If we are limitless, then that means we are creating our own reality. That validates the universal laws and the Hermetic laws, the law of attraction, the law of correspondence. What we think creates our reality, which
Mhm.
means the greatest weapon in on human people is weaponized victimization. If you can convince somebody that they're a victim of their experiences, then they will use every universal law to sabotage their entire life institutionally at every level, all the while having not a clue that that's what they're doing. And when you can finally see scientifically through the 77-page theory I propose that that is what you're all doing, that is what we are all doing, we're choosing
Yeah.
our experience, then we finally have the reason, the logic, the purpose to get out of it. And that's the thing. People are just lost in it. They have no lighthouse. The unity theory is essentially a lighthouse to lead us all back to love and to not disregard the right brain, feminine woo woo stuff that people just say, oh, that doesn't make scientific sense. That can be explained away, whatever. It doesn't change my life. This is a big plot hole for those people. They cannot ignore what is in this book. And if they
Mhm.
do, they are literally choosing insanity,
I
literally to do the same things over and over and over again and ignore new data that can fundamentally change their lives.
I think that you made a really important point, and you mentioned, this, like, I forget what you called it, but victimization of thought, basically. And there are so many opportunities where that happens in our society. And I saw when Laura interviewed you on her show, who happens to be in the chat room. Hi, Laura, and welcome to the show. You used an example of, like, if a person is diagnosed with ADHD, and then they kind of go on that trajectory of believing it, being that full victim, and they kind of create their reality around that label. Can you speak a little bit more on that? Because I thought it was a really good way to, like, break it down into nuts and bolts for people.
Absolutely. So I'm working on creating an interesting docuseries or documentary. I haven't really figured out how it's going to roll out, about how the Matrix uses these universal laws and truths to manipulate us. And I bring up in my lectures, recently in Deborah Thunderbeat's conference, I did
Mhm.
Awakening from the Matrix was my topic in my slideshow. And I specifically cover modern psychology. And, I give out this disclaimer. When it comes to anything I say, anybody watching this, only take what resonates, disregard what doesn't. You have free will. You can be confident
Mhm.
in your experience. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything here. But with that being said, everything in our free will universe has to be disclosed to us so that we have the awareness to do what we want for ourselves. So the way that the darkness gets away with this without us figuring out what they're doing is they use code. So they put all of the true meanings in the words, but then they teach our conscious mind that the words mean a different thing than what the
Mhm.
words actual vibrations actually mean. And if you look at the other definitions of the same word or a similar word in other languages, you can correlate these patterns within patterns that show the true meanings of the words.
Yeah.
And for example, if you submit a form to the government, you're literally saying to a govern to control mental, the mind, that you are submitting your form. Your form is your body, your beingness, your
Mm.
consciousness to them. You are becoming a slave to them. And
Yeah.
this is built into the words. So when we look at diagnoses in modern psychology, what is psychology? It is inherently psychological. To be a psychopath is to be devoid of love. What is psychology? It is logic of the mind and the mind alone. It is completely devoid of the heart. There are
Mhm.
some psychologists, there are some spiritual therapists that are working on expanding, being more about the love, learning about Heart Math Institute in California and their work. And those people, they're really
Mhm.
bright souls, shifting that out of the darkness. But I mean, look at the word therapist. It's right in front of our faces. The rapist. What is
Oh
rape?
my gosh.
What
Yeah.
what what is rape? Rape is enforcing our will upon another. So we think it's horrible on the
Yeah.
physical level, but what I'm explaining to everybody is that what we think is physical is really a mental experience in our mental universe. So we allow or we don't allow people to abuse other people physically. But then, when institutionally these therapists are taught and conditioned to teach us about nothing but the mind for the most part, again,
Mhm.
um, and then we ignore our hearts, then what happens? We give them a paycheck. Their
Right.
paycheck relies on our pain, which means they'll never help us to heal. Because
Right.
if they help us to heal, then we couldn't give them a paycheck. It's the same thing.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing with pharmaceuticals.
Mhm.
In the pharmaceutical industry, their pay relies on our suffering. So
Exactly.
why would they ever stop our suffering? That makes no
Exactly.
sense.
So many of our systems are set up for us to fail. And that was another topic I wanted to touch on today is like, how do we break free of this slavery system? Because
Hmm.
it is a mental game completely.
Right.
But even the physical structures that are set up in this world are designed for us to fail. And I'm so glad you mentioned the therapy thing because I've always said, therapy or psychiatry or psychology, there's no heart-centered listening happening. They just listen and then they keep asking more questions or they write you a prescription.
Right.
And
So
that's something that I offer is like heart-centered listening because
right.
we need more of that in the world. But go on.
Right. So I want to touch on one last thing before we transition to how we can break out of this
Mhm.
slavery system.
Sure.
And I want to mention the very important thing about psychology. It brings us back to that weaponized victimization. So if the law of correspondence is 100% verified by quantum physics and by unity holodynamics, then what that means is that every time a therapist diagnoses a being, let's say a young woman with borderline personality disorder, which is a very destructive, you know, disorder according to modern psychology. Well,
Mhm.
all the destructive tendencies of that borderline personality disorder, every time that individual starts to say, oh, I'm diagnosed with BPD, and they start telling people that left and right, they tell their family, they write it in their journal, they are manifesting, they are securing and making sure that they continue to experience all of those negative symptoms, those negative instabilities within their own psyche, their own energy.
Mhm.
And they can't break out of that based on that logic. It's just a never-ending hamster wheel cycle. And so that's something really important to know, why I'm raising awareness about modern psychology. I'm not saying it's all bad. I know that it helps a lot of people, and I'm really thankful for that. But moving on, when I was bringing up the pharmaceutical industry, and we're talking about things like doctors. Well, what is a doctor? A doctor is someone who works on receiving things at the dock. Now we're going into maritime law. So it's all in code, remember? When a person is born, they have a birth certificate. This is not a birth of a baby. This is the birth of a vessel in the waters of their mother. And it's all in code, and we don't know this. But because they're coming through the birth canal, which is literally maritime law, they are viewing our body as a ship. Because according to the Cestui Act of 1666, which was created by the Pope and the Vatican to rule over this world, they explained that because of what happened at that time during it wasn't the Black Plague, it was a similar type of plague, though, that displaced a lot of people, caused a lot of, burned down buildings and everything. They said, if you do not report to the authorities that you are alive and you have 3 living witnesses to prove you're a living person, everybody on this planet is considered dead and or lost at sea. And what that means is they view us as assets, as money, as fuel. And because of this, the only way that their system can run is if we power their system with our life force. So everybody that is attached, or everybody that's born into this world and enters into the matrix, has their birth certificate, their social security card, they enter into a literal contract that says this: I declare myself a ward of the state and a ward of the court. And because I am a ward, I am an incapacitated adult that cannot think for themselves. So I need a government to think for me. And you are literally giving your free will away to that authority.
And your
because
sovereignty.
Right, because you're contracting with them. And according to that act, and according to anybody that has a Cestui trust, which is, arises from that act, and we all have one, you can all look it up. If you are in a Cestui trust, if you are still under the Cestui Act, you have no authority to contract with anybody on this planet. And that means every time, for example, I hate to say it, but this is how reality works. Every time a police officer puts on his badge and he goes out and he gives somebody a ticket, or if he even asks somebody to roll down their window, he's breaking the law. The only way that a governmental system, which is a false, fraudulent system, it's a big hoax, the only way that it can actually have any sort of backing is through lies. And this is explained in certain documents we find correlating back to the U.S. presidency. I believe during the Eisenhower period, there is this whole article that I have in my recent talk at Deborah Thunderbeat's Sedona Cosmic Awakening conference. You can find that on my YouTube at the Crimson Eagle. And I'm sorry, I just totally went blank there. What was I just talking about?
You were talking about the maritime laws and how do you spell it? The Cestui.
Yeah, Cestui Act, which is CESTUIVIE. Yeah.
Hang on,
Or
I'm going to create a banner for
QUE.
it. Spell it again.
CES
CES
TUI
TUI
space QUE
QUE
space VIE. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
yeah, so what happens is we figure that we're sovereign and we live in this free country called America, but we don't realize that in code all of these things are happening behind the scenes. So we as we continue to allow this to happen, then every year our Sesta KV trust, which is the trust tied to that act, every one of us has one of these. It is bought and sold on the stock market behind our backs, and millions to billions of dollars are made. Well, if you didn't exist in this reality, they wouldn't be able to make that money. So that money, that energy, is coming from somewhere. It's coming from you, which means you are a battery which is powering the matrix of mainstream society, built to keep us in the illusion of separation, the only
Mhm.
source of all suffering on this planet. So the
You
way
just
that we,
described The Matrix,
right,
the
so
movie.
the way that we break out of this is,
Mhm.
one, we talk more about the truth. We bring things like unity theory to the mainstream, which we've been waiting for it. They've been waiting since the days of Albert Einstein for someone to solve these, mysterious things in science. So now that we have this, we can make it go mainstream. And per the theory itself, it explains that everything's vibration. So our collective vibration is the reality we experience. If you feed this to the collective vibration, then this is the collective vibration we're going to experience. We're going to start to have heaven on earth. We're going to, use our institutionally sabotaged systems to give every man, woman, and child clean water, clean food, no poisons or GMOs, and shelter in a community. And
Mhm.
all of us can work together. All of us can rise above our issues and our circumstances. And free energy will be the next thing to roll out when we start to follow this. But as Einstein said, the world as we know it is a product of our thinking. We cannot change it without first changing our thinking. And this is what he was talking about, because
Mhm.
the very thoughts that we have, we thought, those are just thoughts. They don't exist
They
outside of
don't
my mind.
matter.
They don't
Right.
go anywhere. But the thing is, in a mental universe, thoughts are just as physical as your arms. So that means every thought you're putting out is counting. And another way we can explain it is, if there are infinite universes, you have two sides of the same coin. One, everything that could ever happen is going to happen. So that means nothing matters. But two, since nothing matters, the opposite is true as well. Everything
Everything matters.
matters.
Everything matters.
That means the numbers on your receipt matter. The amount of apples in your kitchen matter. Everything you could ever focus on in terms of information is important. And when you can see the patterns within patterns that interlay within this information, you can
Mhm.
see that eagle eye perspective, which is why I go by the Crimson Eagle. And when you see that eagle eye perspective, this is what Yeshua was talking about, having eyes to see and ears to hear in ancient
Mhm.
prophecy. And when we open up to our intuition, which is our heart, heavily connected to our feminine side, which has been enslaved by these programs to use that fear energy, that fear emotion, to hijack the left brain, which carries most of the programming. So here in our right brain, we have programming to keep us upset, to keep us angry, sad, suffering. And that emotional energy is then harvested
Mhm.
by our left brain, which has programs of mental conditioning for more slave type processes. And for example, our left brain would think that it's the light side. It thinks that it's the good guy. And if you tell the good guy that, oh, there's some evil people over there, the good guy is going to go and try and attack the evil people, or, put them in jail or something. But the more that the light listens to the shadow of the collective, of that fear energy, then the more the light becomes a slave to the fear. So
Mhm.
the only way that we can rise above both of these is by integrating them together and choosing that higher vibration, going beyond fear into courage and the higher vibration emotions. And when we do that, we enter non-duality. Non-duality is the vibration we need to ascend in the age of Aquarius. And the great thing about this age of Aquarius is that it is magic. It is science made mystical. It is imagination made real. And this magic is going to become very, very soon a regular occurrence for anyone in this reality, because we are coming to a point where the shift will make it so. And that's why I want to share unity theory with the world, with all of you watching this. That's why I hope that if it resonates with you, you share it with all your friends and family, all the people that it would resonate with you, because the faster we make this knowledge mainstream, the faster in linear time these things will manifest. And we're going to see, I've had visions, visceral visions awake, not sleeping, not dreams, visions of people flying. Visions of people being able to do things that are beyond our wildest imagination. And then these visions are being qualified by me meeting the people in the visions that I'd never met before. So this is 100% going to happen in this lifetime. You will see people like Superman rise from nothing. And those of you out there who feel lost, who feel like you are of the light, that want to see a better world, a brighter world, full of unconditional love, family, peace, and prosperity, it is now 1,000,000% within your reach. All you need to do is learn these things, integrate them, and be them. You can learn it all day, but if you're not going to be that vibration, you can't use the law of correspondence to manifest it. You can't use the law of attraction to attract it into your reality. So there are no loopholes. There are no shortcuts. The only way that we can reach this ascendance is through sheer, pure, unconditional love. And I'd love to leave your audience with one simple guideline. If you want to heal your life, you want to heal yourself, your ego mind, you want to open your heart and reach your full potential, it's not a 12-step program. It's not a 6-step program. It is a 1-step process. Always choose unconditional love over fear, which is everything positive over everything negative, first towards yourself and everything in your experience, and then towards everyone and everything else. And if you follow that guideline with 100% accountability, 100% honesty, you will see the universe reflect back to you faster than you could have ever imagined your greatest life.
Wow. That would be amazing if everyone could do that all of the time. Could you imagine? We'd have a shift like overnight. That would be amazing. Wow. So we'll have to do a part 2 on how to do that, because that's easier said than done, obviously. Or we wouldn't be in this reality.
I want to be clear that I'm not asking people to ignore the darkness. Ignorance is just more low vibration. That's lower than courage. It's not a positive experience. It's to accept, forgive, and unconditionally love these experiences, whether it's an emotion that moves through us. We are not our emotions. They move through us. Whether it's a thought that moves through us, again, we're not our thoughts. Don't identify with them. This is how we move into suffering, if we identify with our thoughts and emotions. So it's realizing that these things are moving through us and that we have the ultimate ability found in the law of perpetual transmutation of energy, that we have this ability to transform any energy into a higher expression. And all we need to do is make that choice. And by making those consistent choices, we come back into the heart. So I hope that helps your audience today.
Yes, wonderful. That was so beautiful and well said and well put together. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. Where can people buy your book? Is it on your website, thecrimsoneagle.com?
Yes. So this information needs to get out to the public as soon as possible. So you can actually get my book for free or love donation on my website. It's not about putting it behind a paywall. I'm working on some current things right now, so I don't have any physical copies aside from just a small handful on me right now. But in the near future, I will be getting more copies. And just so your viewers are aware of a little tip, this version of Unity Theory is version 1.0. If you can see that right there. Yeah. And there's only going to be 777 copies of this specific book in the world. And so this is going to become a collector's item at some point. Imagine having one of the first 10 copies or so of Albert Einstein's theory of relativity. That's essentially what I'm sharing with
Mhm.
people. And
Wow.
then soon I'm going to have either 1.1 or version 2.0. And I'm excited because I'm going to be writing a open letter to all of the materialist reductionist scientists of this world, because that way they cannot ignore me anymore. They have to respond to how I totally dismantle and invalidate their entire argument using their own logic. So it's going to be very fun putting that in Unity Theory 2.0 and showing the world how we really exist.
Wow. Well, I'm excited for the 2.0 version, but I would love to have a copy of the 1.0 version. So I'll definitely go on your website and get one today. And everyone watching, please go to Isaac's website, The Crimson Eagle, and check out his work and check out his book. And if you can get one, definitely get one. And we'll have to have you on the show again, Isaac. Let's see. It looks like somebody made a comment.
Sounds great.
Oh, Dragon Rose, thank you for your comments. She says, interesting information to digest. Thank you. Thanks for
Thank you.
watching today.
Thank you,
Yes.
Laura and Dragon Rose, for hanging out with us. It's been so fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for watching the show. And if you enjoyed this information, guys, please share it with your friends, share this video, like this video, so more people can learn about Isaac and his work. I wanted to put this up. And then also, if you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel, where we're going to have more amazing guests coming on. Next week, we're going to have Rebecca Abraxas, and we're going to be talking about sound healing with the voice through toning, singing, chanting, and she has a beautiful voice. It's going to be an amazing sound healing show. So I'm excited for that one. And then in July, we have Viviane Chauvet coming on the show from the Arcturian Collective. So that should be exciting as well.
Vivian's
So
awesome.
yeah, she's amazing. So thank you again, Isaac. It was wonderful to have you on the show, and we'll have to do it again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cheri, and thank you for everyone sharing with this precious moment. Sharing this precious moment with us. The communication today, it's coming through stifled a little bit. But
No, you were great. You were great.
if my energy resonates with anybody watching this, feel free to connect with me on my YouTube channel at The Crimson Eagle. And it's the same on my Instagram at The Crimson Eagle. And then you can connect with me on Facebook if you'd like as well, which is just Isaac Mars. It's
Oh,
been an
okay.
honor and a pleasure. And
Yes.
I love you all, because at the end of the day, all of you are me.
Oh, beautiful. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Isaac, again. Have a beautiful rest of your day. And we will be back soon, next Friday at noon. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.